Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica DiRuzza from Trust Psyche. And for those of you who do not yet know me, I am a licensed psychotherapist, a professional astrologer, and teacher. And you can find my body of work at trustpsyche.com. And this is my YouTube channel, Trust Psyche. Recently, I've been on my Instagram at trust.psyche and taking polls of ideas of what you all wanted to hear me speak on. And yesterday, somebody requested that I speak on the topic of mother wound and parentified children. So I'm calling this live stream here today Moon-Chiron, the mother wound and parentified children. It's a very sensitive subject matter, and I'm going to briefly outline what a parentified child is, and then talk more subjectively from what I've seen and how we can work with this dynamic that's often very chronic and painful and largely unconscious in people who are parentified children. So, thank you so much for being here with me on this live. It's such an honor to be able to share this time and space with you. I also wanted to let you all know that after 14 years of giving professional astrology readings, I have decided to step back from giving them and focus entirely on my psychotherapy practice, where I include astrology in that work and also teaching astrology to all my students around the world. Some of you are here right now with me. And I'm really excited to share that my husband, Travis DiRuzza, is now giving professional astrology readings. And you can reach out to him at any time at travis@trustpsyche.com. And he's doing individual readings, synastry readings, composite readings, readings for children. He is also doing solar return readings, and he loves doing transit astrologies, particularly going back in time and helping people understand and integrate their past, whether that's their childhood, their adolescence, their younger years, whatever it may be. And I also, now that my daughter, who is, you might hear in the background a little bit, is 1 years old, I have the capacity once again to open up a few more sessions in my psychotherapy practice. So I've been full for a while now, and some of you reached out to me, and I haven't been able to take any new clients, but I am now able to do that. So I'm going to be opening up 3 more weekly psychotherapy sessions. And if you're interested, or you know someone who'd be interested in doing that work with me, you can email me directly at jessica@trustpsyche.com. Okay, let's get started. So the reason why I'm correlating the mother wound and parentified children with the Moon Chiron aspect isn't necessarily because you have to be born with that natal aspect to be a parentified child, right? Being a parentified child is something that there isn't one planetary placement or aspect that relates to that. Just like we can't tell if someone's introverted or extroverted by looking at the chart, and we also can't tell if someone was parentified or not. These co-determining factors and these psychological um, uh, tendencies aren't something that the chart itself can tell us. That's something that we can only understand by looking at a person's life and understanding their biography. So, just that, like, for example, not every Leo is an extrovert, or not every Cancer is an introvert. We have extroverted and introverted Leos, we have extroverted and introverted Cancers. Any chart can be parentified, but currently, right now in the sky, there's an exact Moon Chiron opposition in Libra and Aries. And I just thought that that is one archetypal universe and portal of understanding that we can enter into by invoking the Moon Chiron energy to help us get a better depth psychological understanding of what the mother wound can look like and feel like to a child, and then understanding that process of parentification. So, in defining what parentification is, signs of parentification, if you were parentified or someone you know is parentified, is you felt responsible for your siblings or your parents. So, it can either be, there's 2 different kinds of parentification. There's instrumental parentification, where you had to take care of your siblings or other relatives because a parent was unable to for whatever reason. And then also within that, assuming all the housekeeping responsibilities, paying the bills, doing the chores, doing the grocery shopping, and doing the cooking. Then the other kind of parentification is emotional parentification, where you were responsible for listening to your parents talk about their problems, or you were brought in as a mediator or peacekeeper to deal with either your parents' issues and arguments or that between other adult family members. So, if then um, your childhood felt like there was an absence of that feeling of play that other kids got to seem to have, where they got to really play with other kids and live in a world of imagination and get to be kids, that often is a strong sign of parentification. Or if you felt like you had to be the peacekeeper, that that was your role, and then the positive reinforcement that you got from that were verbal cues like, you're such a good child, you're so responsible, you're so mature. I think even sometimes in new age communities, that can also be translated into things like, you're such an old soul. If you're told a lot, oh, you're such an old soul by the time you're age 5 to 7, okay, maybe that's true, but also it could be an indication that you had to grow up very quickly because your one or both of your parents weren't able to be parents. Often there's a sense of anxiety and depression that can start very early. And also, you were given responsibilities that were not age appropriate, and you felt like your family wouldn't make it without you. We can see this a lot in children of alcoholics or drug addicts. We can see this a lot in children whose parents had chronic illness. Or we can see this in children where their parents were absent or neglectful for whatever reason. As an adult, uh, typically there's difficulty in having other people take care of you, and there's a difficulty in being able to let loose or to let go. So, oftentimes, there is a kind of character development of needing to really be in control of everything, and also often being the one in all of your relationships to be the one that's very responsible and functional and put together, and so, therefore, you, as an adult, you tend to be the caregiver or the peacemaker in your relationships. Um, and there often can be a profound sense of shame around having any needs or being able to share those needs with other people. So, there's often a tendency to hide from other people what your feelings are when you're hurt or if you need something. So, a difficulty in asking for help. And also, most people in the helping profession, like myself, a psychotherapist or a social worker, or even nurses and um, doctors, they often can be parentified children because they're conditioned from the beginning of life or early in life to take care of other people as part of their identity and how they get their worth. And so they tend to live a life that's consistent of being of service to others. Some people turn that into a career, a profession, others don't. But oftentimes there's a feeling of being obligated or a sense of duty to hold space and nurture and take care of other people, and oftentimes at the expense of one's own health, whether that's mental health, physical health, spiritual health. The abandonment of the self is one of the main qualities of being a parentified child because you learn from an early age to put yourself at the back of the line and to put everybody else before you. And so there's often a sense of being severed or cut off from one's self, which includes one's needs and one's desires, but then that inner child place of play and spontaneity and creativity and joy, following your bliss, following your heart, living in the present moment. There's often a theft or a robbing of this development, this natural development in early childhood. And so, parentified children in their anxiety definitely have a harder time living in the present moment as adults because they're constantly thinking about the future. They're constantly thinking about everybody else and how best to take care of everyone else. Again, often at the detriment or the expense of one own self. Um, so, kind of then moving into understanding what are some ways that we can then break the cycle of parentification as adults, we look for things like genuinely learning that not everyone's well-being is your responsibility, right? Easier said than done, because being a parentified child is something that often feels so core psychologically that the emotional truth of feeling that your survival depends on how others around you are doing, if they're okay or not, right? We can think of things there like what we would typically call as codependency. Um, it's so cellular and it's so visceral, and the emotional truth of it is so real subjectively that even if we cognitively might understand that not everyone else's well-being is our responsibility, it's a very hard thing to actually live moment to moment and day to day, especially in our relationships with the parent that we were holding space for and having to take care of, or the siblings. Um, Also, there is, in breaking the cycle, a resigning from being the peacekeeper, not getting one's sense of self-worth from being the one who's able to mediate everyone's relationships, particularly in your family or in your community. Then there's also being able to reconnect with the inner child. So putting play before work, being spontaneous versus needing everything to be known and controlled at a very high degree, where your whole day or your whole week or your whole month is extremely planned out. So if every moment on your calendar is planned out, and it's difficult to just be in the flow or in the present moment, right? That's a sign of parentification. And so part of breaking that and that reconnection with the inner child is actually learning to make more time and space for play over a highly regulated schedule. And then I think one of the biggest tell signs of being on that journey or that practice, which it is a journey and a practice to break parentification, has to do with learning to ask for help from others and learning to receive support from other people. And then lastly, I would say boundaries. So having really clear boundaries that are defined within your relationship with your family members and at work, that then also allow you to increase your self-care and learning to prioritize yourself, right? Classically putting on your oxygen mask before putting on anybody else's oxygen mask. And being able to truly listen to what your internal experience is. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What is it that you need, before first assessing and knowing what everybody else around you needs. So if you're more tuned into how the people around you are feeling versus how you're feeling, that can be a sign of parentification. And so part of breaking that cycle is actually reversing that process of learning how to first ask yourself how you feel and what you think, versus being concerned about that for everyone else around you. Um, I think that this is an extremely messy process, and it's takes a lot of time and practice, um, as it does anything when we're really working at the deepest layers of our psyche and core relational dynamics that we have, either from day one or very early in childhood. Um, it it's so a part of who we are that I think we tend to be quite unconscious around what's going on there, which is why getting support and asking for help from others is one of the key ways for us to learn or to be modeled to us how to change these dynamics. And I think that that's an inherently scary process because it's antithetical to the way that a parentified child is raised. Um, so sometimes by asking for help, it actually can feel like we're betraying our parents or our siblings or the people that we had to take care of. And that in that practice of trying on putting ourselves first, it often um, can even feel like a violent process because of the response and reactions that we get from the other people in our life when we learn how to uh, hold our own line and to hold our own boundary. So I think that this is not for the faint of heart, and I think that it's something that we're only able to break as a cycle once we're in a place as an adult to have the capacity to go in and um, genuinely grieve and mourn the loss of having a childhood. And I think that um, this is a very delicate process that necessitates the presence and the help of another loving, compassionate person to hold space for us. Because as parentified children, we're constantly holding space for other people, right? Which tends to give us qualities like empathy and heightened intuition, which are amazing abilities and gifts, but that oftentimes were misused or abused by those around us for their own self gain, often very unintentionally and unconsciously by the parents or the adults in the situation. And so, part of breaking the spell, and I do think it is about breaking a spell, it's about breaking the um, ontological and epistemological truth that our reality is a certain way. I think it requires another person being there with us to to in an embodied way model to us another way of being, because if we weren't modeled how to put ourselves first and how to take care of ourselves as children by adults in our life, then we're not going to know how to do that. And we might be able to read a book or watch some videos, watch this video, or conceptually talk about it, but I think at the end of the day, to actually heal the relational wound of what took place there, of having to grow up too quickly, um, and the abandonment of self out of survival, we actually need to do that in relationship with another person, like a professional who can help love us through that process of encountering often layers of deep rage and profound agony and grief over having to put everybody else before oneself. There's a huge loss there. And so oftentimes when people talk about inner child work, sometimes it can kind of feel, I think, a little superficial and a little kind of 1, 2, 3, do these steps and you'll be free, or your inner child will be free. It's kind of like when someone's like, learn to love yourself. It's like, yeah, but what the fuck does that actually mean? Like, what does that really look like? How do you do that? And I think that when we're learning to do something new, um, for me, I feel very awkward and young when I'm doing it, and so there has to be a lot of permission um, to, yeah, make mistakes and to try new things on. But I think that um, a lot of inner child healing work, when we're looking at parentification, actually is um, built upon learning how to be in relationship with other people where uh, we genuinely get asked, how are you doing? And the other person has the ability and capacity to sincerely listen and receive the truth of what is happening internally for us, what our feelings are, what our thoughts are, and to be met and received at a level that we are used to giving to everybody else. I think adults who are parentified often feel isolated as adults and often feel a lack of intimacy in their relationships. They have no problem with other people finding them to be very intimate, or other people sharing their secrets and their stories with them. But then to be able to say that people in your life are able to hear you and hold you and really be there for you to share your truths, um, that tends to not be the case with adults who are parentified, who um, haven't begun to break that cycle of being caregivers and peacemakers in their relationships. And I think that there's a lot of sadness there around that, because when um, other people think they're our best friend, or when other people feel so deeply seen and touched by us, and then we don't feel that same level of reciprocation, and it's not a mutual shared experience, that's actually not real intimacy, right? um, that is coming often from a shame-based place where we get our worth by showing up and holding space for other people, and then people valuing us, or liking us, or wanting to be our friend, because of being such a good listener, being so empathetic, right? Um, and so I think it's scary to break that cycle, because the fear is that if we really share who we are, ask for help, and ask other people to show up for us, that we're going to be disappointed and let down, because historically, people weren't able to do that for us, and our parents weren't able to do that for us for whatever reasons. And so, there's a lack of trust that that's capable, and when there's a lack of trust, there's a lack of faith, and there's a lack of belief. And in my experience, when we wake up to that, um, there's a profound kind of shock and awe of the level of pervasiveness and saturation in our life, in all our relations, where the tendency is that, people turn towards us instead of us turning towards people. And I think that that experience happens on a spectrum, but um, I think that's why a big part of doing that really loving repair work with the inner child actually not only takes time, but it becomes a lifelong practice. It's a daily choice. It's not like all of a sudden, at least in my experience, we fully grieve the loss of a childhood, and then all of a sudden, we have all healthy relationships and we know how to express our needs and emotions. It's like, yeah, okay, sometimes it's cathartic, and sometimes there's a profound release of emotion, and actually, it seems to be a little bit more, sixth house Virgoian, in that it's a daily moment to moment practice and choice, and we fall off center and we come back, and we fall off center and we come back. Um, I think the grief is exquisite because the need of a child is exquisite. It's an exquisite need that every human being has, that dependency on one's caretaker to, feed us, to shelter us, to keep us warm, to keep us emotionally feeling good and safe. And so, if there was the absence of that, if there was the lack of that, if there was the neglect of that, then, there are going to be things, not just in our psyche, but in our perception of other people, perception of reality, and even our cosmology and our spirituality, that is going to be deeply informed by that lack of trust, or that lack of, um, really believing that you are important and you deserve to come first, and you deserve for people to really listen to you and care for you. Um, what else do I want to say about this for now? I think that, in the connection with Moon Chiron, obviously the moon has to do with the parent child relationship and our early childhood experience. And then our emotional body, our psyche, and our soma, all those things go together, right? So our psychosomatic experience of our emotional body and our subjectivity, combined with the relationship that we had with our parents and siblings and our early childhood experiences, it's an imprinting that happens there. And that's why often the moon is connected with the subconscious or the unconscious, is because it's something that happens before we have language. It's something that happens before we have, self perception and egoic identity. And so the imprinting is, deeply psychic and energetic, and therefore cellular. And, Chiron being the place where, we have unresolved wounds, wounds that are often extremely painful and produce a lot of suffering in our life. And in my experience, the less we tend to those places of pain and suffering, um, the more pain and suffering that we live in. And the more we believe that that's how life has to be. Because, um, that's how life has been. So of course one is going to um, subscribe to that narrative that that's how things have to be and that's how things are going to continue to be. And so we really have to watch out for Chiron in our charts around deeply held beliefs uh, that that's how things are and that's how they're always going to be. So whenever we get caught into thinking of always and never, kind of extreme versions of reality, um, we have to be careful there because it requires a certain level of curiosity if that's actually true. But the thing that's tricky about relational wounds, like a mother wound or being parentified as a child, is it happens at such a young place in life that that level of early imprinting naturally creates a belief and a story that that's how reality is and that's how life is always going to be. So that's why, in part, I think it necessitates another person being there to help hold us and challenge those thoughts in a very loving, compassionate way with curiosity. Because in my experience, actually, other things are possible and other things are very real and true. But I think that's where the catch 22 is. And I think this is true for anything that we are operating out of as a psychological truth that has a potential to change. Um, I don't think it's something we can read in a book. Cognitively, I think we understand a lot of things, but emotional truth is different. And because we're relational beings, it does require a relationship to go in there and help heal those things. And in my experience, it's probably the scariest thing I've ever done is having to ask for help and support. And then going through the awkward messiness of learning how to receive it after asking for it. And I by no means have that mastered, but I am getting better about taking the risk to expose myself and name what's happening for me and talking about it with people that I really trust and know that care about me, right? So Um, I'm gonna end here with this, and I want to thank all of you for being here with me in this live. Is um, when you look at the astrology of a person who was a parentified child, I think part of what you see in the planetary placements is not a placement that shows you causally that that person was parentified, but if that they were parentified, the aspects in the chart can sometimes come through in a distorted way because there's something that's atrophied in the psyche when we don't get to go through the healthy normal stages of childhood development. There's parts of our psyche that are arrested or stuck um, in those places. So the more kind of perfect or functional that a person seems, the compensatory function of that in the psyche would be a child that is confused, afraid, where there's a lot of messiness or a feeling of being out of control or feeling very anxious or depressed. And so, astrologically, when we're trying to understand any aspect there, what we want to get curious about is naming what are the positive functions of what's here in parentification. Okay, you're a very empathetic person, you're highly intuitive, you're very caring, you are very tuned into other people, so socially you do well in life, people tend to like you. Those are all great things. But the negative things that come with that is um, typically being someone who's very controlling, doesn't get to live in a space of play and freedom, someone who, um, you know, feels a sense of anxiety and depression, someone who often feels that there's this kind of insatiable grief that underlines uh, most of their adult relationships of feeling not seen, not heard, not met, right? And so if the person has Moon Pluto, then we're going to tend to see more of an obsession in relationships or feeling possessed by relationships. Or if the person is Moon Neptune, then we're going to see an overemphasis on um, merging and loss of self and um, processing and experiencing the other people's needs and emotions over being in tune with what one needs. Or if the person is Moon Uranus, then we're going to see this kind of tendency for there to be an extreme split in the psyche around the need for connection and the need for freedom. So there's parentified children have an exacerbated experience or a more extreme experience of the splitting of the aspects in their chart because there wasn't the opportunity to have the natural normal development of going through all the phases and stages of learning to be with the different parts of oneself because nobody was there to do that for you. And so because you had to do that for them at such a young age, you have to cut off certain healthy parts of yourself in order to survive. And I think that's part of the delicacy and the nuance of going in and doing that inner child work psychologically is being with those places, but then astrologically for us to have a lot of care and sensitivity to identify children and understanding, yeah, there tends to be more black and white thinking in general. There tends to be more psychological splitting. And so the natal placements of the signs, of the houses, of the aspects are going to have more of a tendency for that splitting in their expression. Okay, so those are just some of my initial ideas and thoughts here about parentification and just yeah, connecting it thematically today to Moon Chiron. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you like this video, please like it. I always love to hear from you, leaving a comment below, and to subscribe to my channel. All right, everyone, I'm Jessica DiRuzza from Trust Psyche. So good to be here with you, and I look forward to being with you all next time. Take good care, and I'll see you soon. All right. Ciao, everyone.